howdy, y'all. We're absurd and we're here. And so, yeah, I hope you're ready for whatever the hell this is going to be. Yeah.
I'm not ready.
You're not ready?
Yeah, I'm not going to be on camera tonight.
Okay, well, that is, in case y'all aren't familiar, my partner, just Maddie from Objectively Subjective's channel.
And that is Snarky completely forgetting the joke.
I didn't forget the joke.
You did, because you were supposed to say, why aren't you going to be on camera? Because I'm wearing camo, and you just ruined it. You ruined the joke.
I didn't do it on purpose at all.
This is just really absurd, y'all. Trying to salvage the joke.
Yeah, no, the joke's dead. The joke's dead. Snarky cannot do a bit for fucking life ever.
I think that you have a good point. It's just your tone, you know. I really
don't fuck my tone. 5 minutes ago, I'm like, hey, here's how this bit is gonna go when we start. You're like, okay, cool, and then I try it, and you're like, oh, okay. Not going to be on camera? That's fine. I don't remember what we talked about before the stream.
I love that the first thing we start out with is an absurd freak out. That's great.
This is not an absurd freak out.
I find it rather absurd.
Comedy is life, and you destroyed it.
Oh, I destroyed life.
Settle down, Chowder.
Oh, boom.
Oh, yeah.
And the one deal in the one deal in the actually good jokes, Faithless Southerner is here with me.
I will mute you this entire stream, Snarky.
This is my channel. You can't do that shit.
I can too.
I'll boot you out of here, motherfucker.
Ooh, I ain't afraid of you.
You should be. You should.
Comedy is super serious.
Not like anything matters.
Nothing does. Everything is meaningless, y'all. I mean, that is just the crisis in which we live. So, both of y'all, shill your channels, do whatever, do the camo joke. I don't care.
Well, it's too late for the camo joke.
Yeah, it's way too fucking late. How do we do the?
We can't do the bit now.
Here we go. I'm gonna do it. Oh, I'm not gonna be on camera tonight.
Hey, why aren't you gonna be on camera tonight, Maddie?
I was a little confused about the stream. See?
Oh, it's camo, not Camus. Doo-doo. Well, we're on Snarky's channel, so we have to explain the joke.
Yeah, that was amazing. It was great. It was just perfect. Fuck, I'm glad I spent 10 minutes putting this on.
That's time you'll never get back.
I could have not worn face paint tonight. Then I was like, you know what? This is a great joke.
Who is this person? It looks like somebody I used to know.
No, I don't. This doesn't look anything like that. Your joke doesn't make sense.
It does.
Because it's absurd.
Yes, that's exactly the point.
It doesn't have a whole lot of meaning.
Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into the topic because...
Yeah, why don't we? Let's go.
So we're going to be talking about Albert Camus' Myth of Sisyphus and absurdism. Now, in case you're wondering, in philosophy, the absurd doesn't refer to just something that's silly, like all the shit that has happened so far, but instead it refers to the conflict between the human tendency to seek inherent value and meaning and reason and shit like that in a world that is purposeless, meaningless, and irrational and chaotic. Okay, and it's not just the person or the world, but the dynamic between these two things. And as for Albert Camus, he was a French philosopher, author, and journalist, a Nobel Prize winner in the 1950s, who died at age 44, I believe.
46.
46 in a car accident, which was tragic. He was also a national of Algeria, which of course was kind of a colony of the French. It was kind of, yeah, that was a tedious situation in which he lived in. So he had a really rough life. And he was kind of a bit of a Marxist, bit of one, little bit. So yeah, we're gonna be talking about that, and if you need like to read along or to read it later and see what you can gather from the text, links in the description. Also, the links to Faithless Southerner's channel and Objectively Subjective are also in the doohickey. So subscribe. Eventually, Faithless Southerner will have content.
Indeed, I will. So
We
go
hear,
subscribe
we hear that it's soon. Soonish. So yeah, it's gonna be great when it comes out. So yeah, the myth of Sisyphus. Now the gods had condemned Sisyphus to ceaselessly rolling a rock. Oops, I didn't screen share. I should do that. I should do that shit. Oh my god, I'm totes professional.
Professional, y'all.
All right, so the gods had condemned Sisyphus to ceaselessly rolling a rock to the top of a mountain, which the stone would fall back of its own weight. They had thought with some reason that there was no more dreadful punishment than futile and hopeless labor. Now, when it comes to life, it kind of seems that way, doesn't it? I mean, we get up every day, we kind of do the same shit every day. I mean, I know when I'm like cleaning the kitchen or cooking, or it's like, okay, I did this shit yesterday. What is the point? Is there a point to it? Like, why? Especially when I'm depressed. Y'all ever feel that way?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I didn't know if you wanted me to talk or not.
No, I didn't. It would be absurd of me to. So yeah, I mean that's kind of the situation that I think we mostly find ourselves in, especially during a time where capitalism dominates everything, yada yada. Usually, you are working for someone else in order to enrich them. Of course, it benefits you because you get to pay rent and maybe have a little left over after you buy food and rent and all the stuff that you need that are your necessities. And sometimes it just seems rather futile.
Absurd.
Well, futile. Not what you would expect out of the good life.
It's almost like there isn't any inherent meaning to life.
Ah, exactly.
Almost.
And the thing that I really like about existentialism, which
thankfully Jesus brought us meaning.
Speaking of that,
thanks Jesus.
The thing that I like about existentialism is it challenges this idea that we have this essence as humans that was given to us by some creator, and from that essence stems our existence. It's in fact the opposite for the existentialist. First we exist and then we grow into our essence through our desires and the things that we seek out and experience. So yeah, that's one thing I like about it. But it can seem kind of different. You don't feel like you're living for some kind of vicarious being out there that it has your meaning laid out for you. You have to kind of come up with it yourself. So, yeah. What happened?
What happened to what?
I hear like a whoa. Okay, it went away. All right, so he goes on to talk about how Homer frames Sisyphus as one of the wisest and prudent of mortals, and talks about some of the trials he went through, and things like that, and how he came near to death, and he had to go through testing his wife's love, and yeah. Eventually, the gods decreed it necessary to snatch him up from his joys in life, that he did experience some joys, and lead him forcibly back into the underworld, where his rock was ready for him to eternally push this rock up the hill. And when when the rock would roll down the hill, he'd have to go back down and just roll it back up again, forever and ever. for no reason. And so, yeah, as Camus says, you have already grasped that Sisyphus is the absurd hero. He is as much through his passions as through his torture. His scorn for the gods, his hatred of death, his passion for life won him that unspeakable penalty in which the whole being is exerted through accomplishing nothing. This is the price that must be paid for the passions of this earth. Nothing is told us about Sisyphus in the underworld. Myths are made for the imagination to breathe life into them. As for this myth, one sees merely the whole effort of the body straining to raise a huge stone, to roll it, to push it up a slope 100 times over. One sees the face screwed up and cheek tight against the stone, the shoulder bracing the clay-covered mass, the foot wedging it, the fresh start with arms outstretched, the wholly human securing the two earth-clotted hands. At the very end of this long effort, measured by skyless space and time without death, the purpose is achieved. Then Sisyphus watches the stone rush down a few moments toward the lower world, whence he will have to push it back up again toward the summit. He goes down the plane. It is during that return, that pause, that Sisyphus interests me. A face that toils so close to stones is already stone itself. I see that man going back down with a heavy yet measured step toward the torment of which he will never know the end. That hour, like the breathing space, which returns as surely as his suffering, that is the hour of consciousness. At each of those moments, when he leaves the heights and gradually sinks toward the lairs of the gods, he is superior to his fate. He is stronger than his rock. This is the most inspiring part. That despite all of that, you are aware of it. And that kind of in itself is this power that you have over the experience of suffering. Don't you think? Maybe?
Yeah. I hear the fan thing again.
Yeah, that's what I was hearing before.
I don't know what that was.
I don't know.
It's very weird. But yeah. What did you want me to say?
All the things.
All the things. The things that are good about this story.
Oh my god.
Are that he's fully conscious in his decision to continue this, and that it's
his fate.
His fate.
But at the same time, he's the observer of his fate.
Yep.
And he embraces it despite the turmoil, despite the agony of being in existence.
And by this, we're told that life sucks.
Right.
Have you ever had...
Life sucks, okay?
Have you ever had moments where, and I know Evans can relate to this through mindful practice, where you just kind of observe things and you feel like just in being that observer, you feel like you kind of have a power over that moment, just in letting it go, just in letting it be what it is, the experience of it?
I wouldn't characterize it as a power over the moment.
How would you characterize it?
I would characterize it, especially especially if you've done mindfulness practice, you can achieve a state in which you are, embody the thing that experiences, even something like consciousness. And so you can see all the sights and sounds and smells and thoughts and things like that. You let me see, it's hard to articulate. You are the thing which experiences.
Right.
It's nothing, and there's nothing else to you except for the thing that experiences. And so it's, and we characterize that thing as consciousness. So
indeed, that's a good way of putting it. I like that. it kind of, and I say it kind of makes me feel powerful when I'm in that state, because usually I feel more stuck from moment to moment and I'm not in it. I'm just kind of waiting for the next one. You know, it's like I'm waiting for the shoe to drop, or I'm waiting for something to happen that's gonna like take me away from the suffering. That's gonna take me away from this absurd feeling. You know, but when I am able to recognize the absurd, I can rebel against it. I can say, no, I'm not trapped in this. I'm participating in it, despite knowing that I have the expectations of the world that I'll never have met. You know? So, anyway, that's the way I see it. What do you think, Maddie?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I don't know. I see it as just accepting your fate kind of
Right?
thing. Just accepting life as it is and realizing that it's kind of shitty for all of us.
Now, that's a very
And
stoic perspective there.
yeah,
Yeah.
life's kind of shitty and you got to deal with it.
Yeah, see, the difference between, I think, Camus' thought about it and, you know, the ideas of the Stoics is he doesn't just accept it, he rebels. He revels in it. He says, well, yeah, this is going to be tough. This is going to be awful in most instances. But despite all that, I'm going to fucking live the most that I can and experience the most that I can. And to me, like the fundamental meaning of life for me is experience.
So I think I think that you could, the way that I would like to or conceptualize it is that most of the time where you're, because, and especially in Camus' other works and things like that, and the people that came before him and the people that came after him that kind of helped mold existentialism, we feel like there's purpose and meaning to our lives,
right?
Because of consciousness, and we feel like that there is something that, you know, came before, something that came after, a goal that we're fighting for, things like that. But then on some level we understand that that's not the case, that life doesn't have any intrinsic meaning, the universe is cold and indifferent towards us, and that no matter how strongly we feel meaning, we kind of know that there is none, that it's all meaningless. And so most people live the tension between those two ideas,
right?
And so you screw yourself into generating meaning yourself, and you can get caught up in a hedonistic treadmill and things like that, but at the same time you still know. So it's kind of like two conflicting ideas where you feel one thing and you seek after the one thing, but you know that ultimately it's meaningless. And what absurdism helps to do is you just fall completely into the fact that there is no meaning. And as Camus puts it, you live in revolt. Or you rebel against the meaninglessness by embracing the fact that it happens.
Yes.
And that it's all absurd and who cares. And so we might as well live as well as we can, which he goes on to articulate to some degree in the rest of the story of Sisyphus.
Yes, exactly.
But then the question is, does it really matter what he says?
Well, that ties back into the sort of anti-philosophy that absurdism has, because you would still recognize that no, it really wouldn't matter. But then you can apply the same feedback loop and go, well, it wouldn't matter, so we're going to revolt against it not mattering. So
yeah, pretty much. And you know, there's also the Sartre book called Nausea, where he first kind of points this out to the world, that there's this feeling that you get that you know there's no inherent meaning. You realize this even though your consciousness is telling you, well, there must be. No, must there be? Must there really be any meaning? So yeah, what does meaning mean? That's a good question. Like, it's so subjective, right? And since it's a product of consciousness, of course it's subjective. But at the same time, that's what you live for, is that conscious experience. So it's just kind of a weird dynamic that we have at play. And one thing that I like about how he talks about, of course, the boundless grief that's very heavy to bear, and these are our nights of Gethsemane. I have had so many of these instances where I just get this weird feeling, whenever I realize the meaninglessness, and I kind of despair, but at the same time, like, the older I get, especially, and the more I realize that I am the one that makes my meaning, the less it bothers me. I see it more as a beautiful experience than I once did. It's not like I don't feel like I'm struggling anymore. I'm just kind of going down the river instead of swimming against it, so to speak. Don't know if that's a good analogy or not, but yeah. I think with
Well, I mean, the point really is, if it's a good analogy or not, it doesn't really matter.
oh my god. So
Am I not getting it?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, it's you. It doesn't matter, but you do it anyway, and you not only do it, but you do it with a smile on your face. And the last thing that Camus talks about in this very good read, I definitely recommend anybody in the chat go and read this. It's very short, but the very last line is, "One must imagine Sisyphus happy." And that is the point. That is it right there. Realize your fate is just doing this day in, day out. And to rebel against it is to be happy regardless of this knowledge. Regardless of the knowledge, there's no meaning. And there's nothing that you can impose upon your world, despite the fact that, as human beings, we feel like we want control over everything that happens and everyone around us, and all of these things. We're never going to achieve that. Going back to stoicism, we know what is within our control and what's not, right? So
well, I think the other thing that's worth pointing out, especially with Camus and his philosophy, is that it's not it for at least my understanding is that it's not we know that meaning is nothing but a manifestation in consciousness, right? That there's no
right.
intrinsic meaning, that the universe is cold and indifferent. We know that, but we feel this in consciousness. And for Camus, we can only live fully whenever we recognize and embrace the fact that there is no intrinsic meaning to the universe. There is no meaning like that. And so for him, living fully was the embrace of the meaninglessness of it all, not to fight against, to revolt against it, to embrace it, but not to insist that it doesn't exist, or to continue seeking meaning in the way that we would normally conceptualize it, something that transcends ourself. Right. We recognize meaning for what it is. It's a function of consciousness. And I think it was Thomas Nigel, however you say it, that expounded on this later on after him, that, he really brought to the forefront that meaning is something that happens in consciousness, and that the contradictions that we feel make us incredibly uncomfortable. And so the absurdism just says, let's do away with all that. Let's live in light of the fact that we know it's not actually, that there is no actual higher purpose. And through embracing that fact, we can revolt against the absurd, to live in the face of it, and to live fully in spite of that fact.
Yes, it is. The outer humanist said in the chat very adequately, I think. Embrace the fact that meaning is a thing imposed by the subject. And that is really the heart of the matter. when it comes to absurdism, is that you realize that you are imposing upon the world, and that ultimately there is no inherent meaning and there's no inherent rationality. It's something you impose upon it. And the main thing is it's an experience. And that's what it is. You don't have to put anything deeper into it. Just embrace the experience. And that is the ultimate revolt against the absurdity. And a way to deal with nihilism. This doesn't mean anything. Well, good. Whenever you look at the idea of meaning, if it's imposed on you from an outside source, that's not freedom, that's tyranny. Whenever you make it up yourself, that's the ultimate freedom. And also the heaviest burden one can bear, because not only are you free, but you also have the responsibility of striving for that meaning, of striving for that betterment, of doing all the things that you want to impose upon the world, but you can't. So you have to live it. And that's what it's about. It's about living the most that you possibly can. So, does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it's definitely. And I mean, I think that it definitely is worth revisiting that imposed meaning is that it coming from an outside source, that it being predetermined and things like that, it is not freedom and not living fully. And so this is definitely not a philosophy for most theists.
Oh, no.
Because it's pretty much you do away with the idea that there could be some sort of transcendent meaning, and you embrace the idea that meaning is a function of consciousness. And but I mean, there's some, it's scary, especially if you've come from a background where you think that meaning is outside imposed, because you can fall into the siren song of like true nihilism.
Yeah.
Not just existential nihilism and things like that, but like truly life has no meaning, therefore nothing really matters. And
that's not a good place to be in.
But yeah. And so and that's for most theists. Dearest Callan in the chat. So
Indeed. And I do want to address the question by the outsider humanist: is living the most the same as living the best? And I would say it depends on who you are. If you are a stoic and you're living the most stoic that you possibly can, and that's the best that you can do, sure. But Camus,
I'm good with getting to 40.
Camus, for Camus, he didn't really address, ethics or morals in this way. For him, living is just experiencing the most, like instead of just staying home and, wallowing in, self-pity or whatever, go out and travel and live and do things, experience, and whether that's the best or not is really subjective. For me, going out isn't really a good thing. For me, living the most is being here and talking about Camus, so it really depends on the individual and their needs and their whatever they're striving for in terms of their own self-actualization, at least in my view. That's not necessarily something that I think Camus would agree with, but that's what I think. I think Camus would say, "Get the fuck out of your house, Jennifer." But
and I would say, "Fuck you, Camus."
And I would say, "Fuck you, Camus." I'm living my life in revolt in my own fucking way. So
let me do my thing. Damn it. You're not even alive anymore. Why are you in my house?
They didn't see you there, to be honest. I mean,
He's on your face right now, is what I hear.
Albert Camus.
But, one of the most famous lines that is attributed to Camus is, the problem of suicide, right? Which every moment of our lives, I mean, we pretty much have this choice, to live on or to not. And his thing was basically, I could kill myself or have a cup of coffee. I'm gonna opt for the coffee, and I totally agree with that.
He must have had shitty coffee if that was like, I guess I'll have the coffee.
Well, I mean,
or was it really good coffee?
In Algeria, I mean, I'm sure he visited France a lot, and they have very good coffee there. So even like shitty coffee would be better than killing yourself, in my opinion.
Oh, he lived in France, didn't he?
He was actually
because he during World War II he edited for the French underground, the resistance and such.
He was raised in Algeria, and he later moved to France, and his friends was Sartre.
Because that's where he wrote the Myth of Sisyphus and the Stranger, I believe, was during the resistance, and all that jazz.
Yes. So anything else you want to say?
You can't gargle with a banana.
Oh my god! Oh,
that's absurd.
Oh my god! Well, I guess we'll be concluding there, and
that's it. We're done.
I guess so.
You can't gargle with a banana.
I guess. I mean, how do you top that? Really? There's no coming back from gargling with a banana.
No, I guess I could just. So, okay. I, for one, am not necessarily the biggest fan of Camus. If it's not been noticeable, I'm not a huge fan. Because while I don't think that we have a meaning from a higher power, I think that there are evolutionary meanings, natural meanings to life. And, the way we have our instincts is a type of meaning. And so that's to take care of one another, to, raise children, to make sure that society gets a little bit better. Those would be things that, in my mind, where we've evolved to push for those things. And so they are kind of a natural meaning.
It all depends, really. I mean, with the children thing, a lot of people would argue, well, my meaning isn't to have children.
Well, no, and I'm not saying, I'm saying society as a whole has meaning.
So back to in terms of the meaning thing, as I said before, I think that's a subjective.
Whatever.
No, I'm just the chat.
What did the chat? Banana gargling, is that a thing?
It's a thing.
You should not try to gargle a banana.
No, I mean I have my problem with the absurd and things like that, because I think that it can be interpreted in such a way as to do away with the importance of meaning in our day-to-day life. Even we can recognize that it is more than an appearance in consciousness, something that we're either biologically predisposed to do or socioculturally, things like that. And it can devalue that. And for me, it doesn't really matter if meaning is a never-ending treadmill. It's still, setting goals and seeing them achieved, living by my standards, living by the way that I want to uphold myself and things like that. There is a great sense of fulfillment that comes from meaning. And I think that if you read existentialism and especially absurdism and things like that in an uncharitable light, you can get the impression that it's like, well, just to hell with that, let's revolt and live and things like that. And I don't necessarily think that that's what Camus was trying to get across, but it's definitely a way that it can be sort of interpreted. And for me, it seems better to just avoid that minefield overall. And I like Camus, and I like a lot of the stuff, and I like satire and the other existentialists. And I think that they made great contributions to the way that I view the world. But for me, it seems like let's talk about what meaning is not, how to achieve it, and how to have realistic expectations of the drive for meaning that we have. And for me, that doesn't, for my day-to-day philosophy, that doesn't really include that doesn't include the sort of absurdism that can be misinterpreted in it.
Yeah, and I can see that. I think because see, the ideas that they were kind of contemplating too during this time of turmoil, as was definitely very well mentioned, it was kind of like to each within their own ability, right? So if you're capable of doing a thing, then do it, and do it with all of your passion, with all of your heart, in order to revolt against this meaninglessness, right? But if you can't do it, recognize that as well.
Yeah, I guess I hear a lot of like in reading the Myth of Sisyphus, a lot of it can go with Stoicism.
Oh yeah.
Which I think is what kind of sullies me on it, because I feel like the Stoics had a better grasp of it than Camus. In that the Stoics would have said, well, what's the nature of man? And this is why we do these things. Now, do they really have any meaning for us? Not really. But because like the cup of coffee or kill yourself, that goes along the same lines as, I think it was Seneca. It might be Epictetus, who said,
Epic titties.
today I could die, or I can take my bath. I'm going to go take my bath.
Yeah, it's very similar.
And Garrett says in the chat, setting goals and achieving them and living by your own moral code is exactly what Camus was all about. Yep. It's not very fair to criticize a philosophical tendency on the basis of an incorrect understanding of it. I agree, totally. But if you read, I can either kill myself or have a cup of coffee, and you read things like the Myth of Sisyphus and things like that, I am all for a in-depth understanding of philosophical concepts and understanding what the author's intent was, what they believed personally, and things like that. However, we have to recognize that humans are really shit at that. And especially whenever we're communicating philosophical concepts, especially things like nihilism, and anybody that studied Nietzsche understands that, the understanding of his philosophy is incredibly deep, and it's hard to get, and things like that. And so for me, there's a much clearer and better way to transmit the ideas that is less open to bastardization. And it may be considered dumbing it down, but I'm okay with that, because philosophy is a tool. It's not a weapon. It's not something that should be infinitely complicated. It's not something that should be, have to be a lifelong pursuit. If it's not helping you in your day-to-day life, if it's not something that's easy to digest and easy to communicate, then I don't view it as useful as things as like concepts like Stoicism. Stoicism is rock simple, and anybody can read Meditations of Marcus Aurelius and know damn near exactly what he means by every sentence that he utters, and in some way or shape or form use those concepts to better deal with problems in their life. Whereas something like Camus is a little more abstract and a little more open to misinterpretation. Oh, yeah. And so I think that any time that we're reading things like this and other hard to digest philosophers, we've got to really make sure that we don't fall into too much of an armchair mode of dealing with the things.
Yeah.
I wanted to say the outsider humanist said something in the chat just a little bit ago that made a lot of sense to me in dealing with Camus. I feel like Camus and Sartre were writing from the perspectives of exhaustion and depression because they seem to be talking about how to deal with just not caring. So, like, if you're taking it from the perspective of somebody who they're exhausted with life, they're depressed, they've gotten to the point where they're just like, I have to find some type of meaning, or this is it.
Mhm.
And at that point, they're like, well, life's really meaningless, but I can set my own goals and choose my own meanings. And if you're going from that perspective forward, it makes a lot more sense to me.
And that's really poignant to me because I have lived, that is just basically my fucking life right there in a nutshell. I've had horrible experiences. I've had depression since as long as I can fucking remember. I've attempted suicide countless times. I have contemplated this whole meaning thing and the options and weighing it out so much. Like, I've probably done this more days than not. So for me, reading Camus just really made me feel like, oh my fucking God, somebody gets it. Because I've never read a philosophy where they just got it, And,
well, and
that kind of connection really spoke to me, and it really kind of lifted me out of what I was in.
yeah, and I think when we're talking about philosophies of life, of this type, there's going to be some that are going to resonate with you. Others are not going to resonate with you at all.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of times the line between the two is very, very slim. So if you go back to ancient philosophy and you talk about the Cynics and the Stoics and the Epicureans, many of the things that they all believed and sought to live were fairly damn close. But there were some things that resonated with the Cynics that didn't resonate with the Stoics, and some of the things that the Epicureans did that the Stoics didn't like. And I think when it comes to choosing a philosophy of life, whereas absurdism resonates really well with Snarky, and she loves the absurdists.
Oh yes.
For me, I like Evan said, the rock hard, solid writing of the Stoics, where this is what the issue is. You got to deal with it.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And so that it resonates much more with me through Stoicism than absurdism does. And I've read The Myth of Sisyphus. I have read, what's the other one that you had me read?
I had you read The End of the Stranger.
The End of the Stranger. And then
There
I
was
read
also
his play.
Oh yeah, Caligula.
Caligula. I read Caligula.
I mean, weird.
It's all enjoyable stuff. Like, I can read through Camus and be like, okay, yeah, this makes sense. But at the same time, it's like it just doesn't click with my mind. Like, this isn't. I would not be a happy person living the absurdist philosophy.
I think that's something that I think everybody does, and I refer to it especially whenever I was going through my deconversion process is like rebuilding my operating system. And so, I went through a lot of life philosophy, everything from the Stoics, all the way to like self-help books and things like that. And I think that the important thing that people need to do especially whenever we're considering life philosophy, is you read it, you find the parts that you think may apply to your life, you give them a test drive and an honest chance, and if it works, then you incorporate that into your toolbox, and if it doesn't, you throw it away. And because especially whenever it comes to life philosophy, these are tools to help us understand and navigate being human, right? And to say that there is to look at it and go, oh, well, there is one right way to be human. You should be a stoic, or you should be a cynic, or you should be an absurdist, or all the other various flavors of sort of life philosophies is a really bad way to approach philosophy. If you come at it and you say, well, I am going to be a stoic, and so I'm going to live my life by stoic principles only, I think that you're really kneecapping yourself for the other things. And if like a lot of my life philosophy is stoic in nature, because it is so applicable and it's so concrete, it's grounded, and it's tested and proven. But there are things in many other life philosophies that you can pick up. You can pick up good things like, especially with the Myth of Sisyphus, is to some degree our meaning is generated by ourselves, and we can find it even in mundane tasks. And that's where, especially the end line that we must imagine him smiling, or we must imagine him happy.
Yes.
Is that even in the most, and who wrote Man's Search for Meaning? Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Even in the most dire circumstances in concentration camps and things like that, we can still find and generate meaning, and find something, maybe not happiness, but definitely a will to continue on. And so I think that's the important thing to pick up whenever we're dealing with life's philosophy, is we need to treat all of these ideas as though they're tools for dealing with the human condition.
Oh yeah, definitely. And as Callan said in the chat, and I really want to highlight this because this is a very good fucking point. So you have to consider Camus was writing during Nazi-occupied French Depression, or France. So depression was an old friend to him. And this is the viewpoint from which he was coming from. And it's something, of course, I can relate to, and I think a lot of people can. But the reason why I even talk about philosophy is not to push it onto people or to say this is the way or anything like that, but I want it to be digestible. I want people to be exposed to it because I think that it's important for enriching their lives. And I also want to make sure that instead of reading, the coffee or suicide thing and then thinking, oh, it's complete shit, I want people to understand, where this philosopher is coming from. And I think it's really important to do that. At least, that's my goal.
And I think to give a good approximation of what Camus was going through, you have to read, at the very least, The Myth of Sisyphus, The Stranger, The Rebel, at least those, and gosh, what was the last one? The one that was found in the wreckage of his car. Boy, it's been a long time since I've really dug into Camus. The First Man, maybe? Something...
The Rebel.
No, The First Man.
The First Man.
Yeah, which was I believe that was the last of his novels. Most of it was found actually in the wreckage, if I'm remembering correctly. And this may be totally off base. It may be my brain doing.
The Plague was a hell of a story.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's one definitely for the reading list. But yeah.
So I was going to add to this to bounce off of Evan's point, because I said I love the Stoics. I definitely do not follow the Stoic principles completely. And one of the things that I take from the Stoics is Seneca wrote that a good idea is universally owned. And so if you find an idea in another philosophy and it resonates with you, you can use that as well. You don't, philosophy is not supposed to be like a religion. It's not supposed to be something that this is what I am, this is what I'm always going to be for the rest of my life, and it's the only true path, because it's going to change. And sometimes you go through life experiences, and the old philosophy that you used to read might not hit you the same way. It might not work for you. You might not be able to do it. And so you find other ideas. And so, yeah.
Well, sometimes you can go back and you can read, like Beyond Good and Evil or something, if you read it as a teenager, and you can go back and read it and gain something completely new from reading the text. And that's one thing that, if you haven't subscribed to Dr. Gregory Sadler's channel, I suggest you do that, because he talks about how to read philosophical text and to gain something from it. And he gives this advice, and I think it's golden advice. And he also does very good lectures that are comprehensive and very helpful. But yeah, you go through different stages, right? And everyone's different. It's a process. And that's why I think philosophy is so important, because at each stage in your life, you can actually gain something from it. It's good exercise for your mind. It's a good way to make sense of your experience. And I don't know about y'all, but my experience hasn't been the fucking best. I mean, we have Trump as president. So, I mean, that's something we're all fucking going through. And everything, like, what was down is up now. So I think it's really important for us to maintain those core principles and to know who we are, what we want. And these are the questions that philosophy addresses, and to read it and to find things that you can relate to, or even brand new things that you haven't thought about. You might run across in another text. It's good. It enriches your life. So, yeah, that's my goal. That's my meaning. That's my purpose. And I might not achieve that, but I'm fine with it, because at least I tried. I did my best. And there's my fucking stoic idea of it all. So,
Here.
Yeah.
And you can't gargle a banana.
No. So I don't know. Are y'all feeling up to an after party tonight or no?
I'm not.
Doesn't
really.
matter to me.
Well, to be honest, I'm kind of tired, but and this one was a lot longer than my usual philosophical streams, so yeah. And the good thing, I do want to point out what TV2 said, because it's good. Philosophies are open for debate anytime, while religious ideas can remain closed for centuries. Yes, very good point. And I think we should end on that. So everybody, please subscribe if you haven't already to
me,
to Objectively Subjective and Faithless Southerner, who will soon have content. And then I'm telling you, Faithless Southerner is going to have some brilliant content.
Soon and very soon, he is gonna upload something. Soon and very soon.
And read the text. Read the text.
Hallelujah.
Because if you read the text that is in the description, you might find something in there that I missed. You might gain something totally different from it than what we presented. But I do want to make sure to highlight, don't fall into nihilism. Don't do it. Have your coffee. Enjoy your life. Love you all. And good night.
Soon and very soon, he is gonna upload something.